Hare Krishna. Welcome to our 16 days of our activism campaign on building safe environments. And our topic today, and as is the conclusion of the 16 days of the activism campaign on building family safety, and is building a circle of safety. And now I would like to say a prayer before we enter into our discussion. Namo Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimadi Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Vastyata Deshatarane. I would like to introduce our two speakers, starting with Krishnarupa Devi Dasi, and we'll give a brief bio. Krishnarupa Devi Dasi is the Women's Minister for ISKCON Australia since 2016 and a full voting member of ISKCON Australia's National Council. She gives ongoing advice and care for the devotees in the temples around Australia and, whenever the opportunity presents itself, around the world. Krishnarupa received first and second initiation simultaneously from Srila Prabhupada himself on Janmashtami 1974 in Vrindavan. She was a resident in Mayapur in the early pioneer days, and although now based in Australia, she generally spends time in Mayapur each year. A resident in India from 1974 to the early 1980s, Krishnarupa was Calcutta's Lord Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra's Pujari until mid-1975. She then moved to Mayapur, engaging in many services, from taking care of a number of young Bengali girls to sewing for Radha Madhava and cleaning Srila Prabhupada's quarters. With only 4 Western women and a small number of local Vaishnavis, she had plenty of service to immerse herself in, including advocacy for the resident women. Krishnarupa and her family moved to Sydney from Mayapur in the early 1980s. For more than 2 decades, she worked professionally in the publishing industry. Krishnarupa is also a member of the Sabha, Spiritual Advisors Bhagavad Assembly, a body that works closely with the GBC and ISKCON members. She is also on the editing review panel, a group formed by the GBC and BBT to review any proposed edits to Srila Prabhupada's books. From time to time, she also edits books for devotee authors. Dedicated to enhancing the role of women in ISKCON and making ISKCON a safe place for all devotees, she has developed a number of seminars to help holistically care for devotees of both genders. However, Krishnarupa's particular focus is in the arena of spiritual and overall well-being for Vaishnavis. These include seminars on the identification and prevention of sexual harassment in ISKCON, the prevention of domestic and family violence entitled Harmony in the Home, and the importance of women in ISKCON. These seminars have been presented either in person around Australia or via Zoom in India, South Africa, and Russia. Krishnarupa has attended a number of courses on domestic and family violence and vicarious trauma held by accredited professionals, such as the General Domestic Violence Alert Workshop and Lifeline's Domestic Violence Response Training, a key initiative under the Australian government's National Plan to Reduce Violence Against Women and Their Children. She works closely with professionals in the arena, both devotee and non-devotee, experts, and engaged in in-depth individual research. Syama Mohini is our next speaker. And I want to give her bio also. Syama Mohini Devi Dasi is a disciple of His Holiness Nirjan Swami and has been practicing Krishna consciousness for over 25 years. She and her husband joined ISKCON Boston in early 1997, and she served as Sunday school teacher for 2 years before moving to Arizona in 2006. Syama Mohini Dasi has served at ISKCON of Phoenix in various capacities, including Temple Vice President and Director of Education. She is a council member and continues her service as Sunday school teacher. Her background in human relations has helped her serve in different initiatives at ISKCON Phoenix. She oversees the Women in Krishna Consciousness initiatives and the Invest in Our Children program. She is a member of the IPA task force and is also the local IPA Intimate Partner Abuse representative for ISKCON Phoenix, as well as the local representative for the Vaishnavi Ministry North America. In addition, Syama Mohini Devi Dasi has the child protection volunteer at her yatra. Welcome, Syama Mohini, and
thank you so much for the opportunity, Antaryami Prabhu, and so good to see you, Syama Mohini. So we're very grateful to be here and very grateful to be able to speak on this concluding panel discussion of the 16-day activism campaign. So the 16-day activism campaign has been focused on safe families, strong communities. And as Antaryami mentioned, today's special theme is building a circle of safety. So Antaryami's got some great questions for us that she'll kick off with, I hope, a valuable discussion. So Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna. We would like to start with the GBC resolution. The Governing Body Commission resolution is: domestic abuse is indefensible, illegal in many countries, and never acceptable within the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Any interpretation of Vaishnava religious or social teachings that condones, endorses, or justifies domestic abuse is rejected by the Governing Body Commission. Now, we'd like to start out with some very relevant questions I'd like to put to each one of you. First question of interest would be how to take action as local leaders, representatives, and community members. What to do and what not to do. So who would like to tackle these questions first?
Well, I can kick off if you like, seeing that I'm the oldest.
Please, Krishnarupa. Please, thank you so much.
I'm the old lady in the group, so I can go first.
Yes, please.
Yeah, it's very interesting points there in that question and that topic of discussion, because it's very important that our leaders and our managers, just as you've read to us, that the very important resolution that was passed actually in March 2020 by the GBC. So it's very important that the management actually is aware of domestic and family abuse in all its nuances. And it's a very, this particular kind of abuse carries with it a lot of trauma, and there's a lot of subtleties to it. So we know that there's all kinds of domestic abuse. There's the physical, where there's bodily harm, but there's also emotional abuse, psychological abuse, financial abuse, spiritual abuse, and all of those things have a very important and very crucial effect on the abused and also the children. So children are secondary victims of domestic violence. But because it's so nuanced and so very delicate, management has to be very aware of all of that, because it can create even more problems if a manager or, you know, a senior devotee goes charging into a situation like a bull at a gate. It can actually create more trouble for the victim. So there has to be a lot of training in domestic abuse, for not only for devotees to raise awareness, to be educated about domestic and family abuse, but also so they're aware of it and managers are aware of how important it is to be very careful in dealing with devotees who either are perpetrators or victims of domestic abuse. So it takes a lot of wisdom and understanding in how do I deal with this. And we can go into more details as we progress in the discussion. But Syama Mohini, I'd like to invite you to give us your comments.
Thank you, Prabhu, and thank you, Antaryami Prabhu. So I think that we should start the local leaders, the representatives, should start by accepting the fact that domestic abuse, intimate partner abuse exists, is there, and we cannot just turn our face the other side. So if we want to seriously do something about it, then the temple management needs to talk to the congregation leader, community leaders, and talk about this issue and have probably the meeting of the minds where the ball will start to roll. What we should not do is ignore the problem. If we are really committed to creating a safety circle, to create a strong and committed society, then we should really need to put our heads in the game. Everything is connected.
Now, I have to ask both of you this question, and you can take the response, whichever one wants to respond. But depending on the locale of the our different yatras, should the approach be different based on where the temples are located? Because different cultures exist in our in our movement, and sometimes the way you would approach this particular issue, which is a very sensitive one, you may be able to address it in a certain way in North America, in another country. Your approach may have to be different based on different cultural aspects. So do you have any particular points that one should consider when addressing it based on, well, let's say time, place, and circumstance, but definitely location? Because how one approaches a leader in one country cannot necessarily, or may not necessarily, be the same in another country. Any thoughts on that, Syama Mohini or Krishnarupa?
Krishnarupa.
Thank you. My first thought there is that the most important thing is to direct someone who is being abused to go to the police. That's the most important thing. In India, I don't know all the details, but they have a lot of really good initiatives for the protection of women. So it's not that, even though we're a spiritual society, it's not that we keep any of these non-spiritual abusive types of behavior, you know, out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. So whenever we're dealing with situations like that, we need to first encourage the alleged victims to go to the police. That's very important. And I don't think it matters which country you are in. Perhaps in Africa, it might have a different nuance. I don't know. I know there's might be a little bit more difficult in certain parts of Africa. I know in Australia, no doubt in North America as well, and other parts of the States, it's very much you encourage them, go to the police. So when a manager, it's come to the attention of a manager that there is some domestic abuse, that's one of the first things that he should be encouraging the victims to do. Have you gone to the police? Do you need help in this? Do you need a support person to go with? And don't, you know, this whole idea of let's shove it under the carpet. We don't want people to think that our ISKCON is a place where domestic abuse can take place. Domestic abuse, domestic violence takes place everywhere. Mm-hmm. Whether you're in a high socioeconomic background, or you're in a poor socioeconomic situation, whether you're highly educated or you're not educated, whether you're a devotee or whether you're not a devotee, this is a terrible issue that happens everywhere. And we have to be very proactive, and we have to take the initiative. So how can we remove this in our society? So the GBC's resolution of 2020 is a very, very important resolution. And I have to say, not that many devotees know about it, surprisingly. Mm. So that's something that, you know, we need to raise awareness of. And if we see our managers not following that, then we need to alert their GBC that, you know, explaining, I've got concerns about this particular situation, keeping in mind this is the 2020 GBC resolution on domestic violence.
Yes. Syama Mohini, please, response.
I totally agree with what Krishnarupa Prabhu has said. And the worst thing that we can do is just keep quiet and let it happen, because then it becomes a trend. And the victim will forever be a victim, and that will create new victims. And the change will never stop. So we need to be serious. We need to put a stop. Enough is enough.
Yes, and really, from my understanding, it's only in recent years that this has actually become a spotlight for devotees. You know, before, I know personally, I've spoken to many of my god sisters, Prabhupada disciples, and many of them had suffered terrible abuse in their marriages. But they couldn't say anything. They couldn't do anything. There wasn't, you know, in fact, one devotee, she'd just been, you know, treated very violently by a husband, and she went to the temple president and said, you please do something about this. And the temple president replied, oh, no one, you know, he doesn't listen to anyone. There's nothing I can do. Mm. So look, it's a far cry now, because there's a lot more awareness and understanding, but it's only been quite recent, even in the last 6-7 years, that more and more awareness is being raised.
I see.
Campaigns like this, which the Vaishnavi Ministry has started, is you know, one of the very crucial ways that we can talk about it and raise awareness and try and solve this very, you know, drastic situation with domestic abuse.
So do you find that, well, maybe let me put it this way, what I've noticed, and then both you, Krishnarupa and Syama Mohini, can address this, but in certain locations where various cultures exist, the idea of domestic abuse is acceptable, and in most cases, it actually is swept under the rug. Not all cases, but most cases. And my question is, in those scenarios, so that one, especially a representative, let's say for domestic violence or international partner abuse, so that one does not come forth as an aggressive individual, a pushy individual, what should one do or one not do if they are approaching leadership and they are not getting a response, and they are also hesitant to go to GBC? So what I'm getting is, after everything is said and done and you've tried to do everything on the temple level, going to the GBC, is there anyone in particular at the GBC that one should approach? Anyone in particular? Or does it matter? Is that a pretty valid question?
Yeah, sure it is, Antaryami. Syama Mohini, you can have a go at this one because I've already just spoken.
That's okay. First, I can speak for North America, right? Every temple should ideally have a local IPA or intimate partner abuse, domestic abuse representative. These reps are trained in how to handle situations. They are trained, they will have information that is crucial to guide those Vaishnavis that come and need help. And one thing that is important to know also is the local laws, either state laws, because if nobody is doing anything, again, like Krishnarupa Prabhu said, he says, well, we can always go to the local authority. And but again, knowing the local laws is very important so that we know what we are dealing with and how much support we're going to be getting, or that victim is going to be getting. It's important to also reach out to agencies that deal with domestic abuse, because they will have much more resources that we can share with those Vaishnavis that are being abused. But again, ideally, the IPA, having an IPA representative in every temple, in every center, it's very beneficial, because it's going to help. The management is going to deal the temple president. They already have a lot on their plate. But if they appoint responsible Karen Vaishnavi or Crane representative, IPA, then they will be able to even help the temple president and tell them, okay, what is next, and what we're supposed to do, whether if children involved, if they're not involved, in different situations, various situations. And again, that is also, this applies in North America, where we have IPA reps. I don't know if it is your case also, Krishnarupa. Do you have IPAs in Australia?
When I was appointed as women's minister, we had not had a women's minister in Australia before. So when I was appointed by our national council. So one of the first steps I took was to establish local women's representatives in each of our temples. So those local women representatives have done some training with me on domestic abuse. And then the next thing that we passed a resolution in the National Council that any cases of domestic abuse has to be reported to me. So then I can make sure that the victim has got the care and the support that he or she needs. And once again, as you mentioned, having those list of resources that you can pass on. So we don't have the IPA is the intimate partner abuse representative, for those who aren't aware, but we have a local women's rep in each of our temples. So that goes a long way in helping devotees. So they've got someone, because statistically it's mostly women who are victims of domestic abuse. Not always, but statistically that's the case, unfortunately. So at least they've got someone that they can go to, and then that person, if they can't manage it properly, then they call me, and then I give them some advice, suggestions. I might speak to the person, the alleged victim herself, or put her in touch with one of my professional contacts that I have, who are always very willing to help. You know, like a lot of countries, Australia has some great resources on a government level for victims of domestic violence. They put a lot of their budget into helping support women who are victims, shelters, building shelters, etc. So I think that's very important. And, you know, if the local IPAs or the local women's representatives, they have good relationships with the temple management, which should always be the case, then there can be more of an interactive dialogue there and say, look, this really, you know, don't mind, but this, you're not really handling this properly. This is how I would recommend you handle it. And, you know, and I think it's, once again, it's that education, giving devotees the information, how to act, what to do. For instance, I wrote a protocol manual for all of our managers in Australia, which points out, it's like a 40-page booklet, which points out, okay, in cases of child abuse, this is what you do. In cases of sexual harassment, this is what you do. In cases of domestic violence, this is what you do. So they can refer to that and go, oh, okay, well, I need to do this, or I need to do that. So that's, you know, that's quite valuable when there's that good connection, and there is, like you have in North America, that intimate partner representative, which you're one, and then Antaryami is one. It's really such a valuable service that you're doing.
Then we're going to have actually a pilot program for ISKCON DC and ISKCON Phoenix. We're having a pilot program for the IPA, and given the documents, and within that, those documents, we have the decision tree. I believe you're familiar with it. The decision tree tool for ISKCON management. So it's very handy, and they exactly tell them what if there is abuse. Is abuse happening right now? Yes, no. Are children involved? Yes, no. Understanding that if abuse is happening and children are involved, that is automatically child abuse, and therefore we are mandatory reporters. So that changed the whole scheme, right? But there are so many things, manuals that again the reps can assist with to the management. But one thing that that you said is key: the relationship with the management, because no project, nothing can really success unless there is that cooperation between the management and the rep. And of course, there will be sometimes, you know, differences, but always have to be look at the big picture and cooperate for a better resolution, cooperate for a better solution and the protection. After all, I mean, we're supposed to be kind to each other, isn't that? If we're going to be Vaishnavas or aspiring Vaishnavas, then we should understand that the Lord lives in my heart as well as in the heart of the person that is being abused. So
yes.
have to be careful.
Yes. And when you understand that, just like our theme is that, you know, building a circle of safety. So when you have safe families, that means you will have strong communities. So where there's a family where there is intimate partner abuse or any kind of domestic and family violence, which is the term we use in Australia, it has such a negative impact on the abused person, on the abuser. You know, can't make spiritual advancement if you perpetrate violence. And then if there are children involved, the terrible impact abuse has, domestic violence has on the child. And as you say, Syama Mohini Prabhu, it's when a child is involved, if there's a child in a family where there's domestic abuse happening, then it is mandatory reporting, the same in Australia as well. It can be, of course, anonymous, but it has to be reported. And just to mention another thing is a devotee friend of mine who is a professional in this arena of domestic abuse. I've asked her to create a presentation for our managers on a national council level, which is, you know, concluding very shortly. So that's also a really great way that we can actually train the managers on how to deal with domestic violence. So just as you were saying, you're doing that in North America, it's such a critical service. It's really, really important.
This sounds really like the ideal situation where you're both located, Krishnarupa and Syama Mohini. Where I'm located, and maybe it's unique, but from what I'm understanding, it's very important to establish a good relationship with management and also reaching out to the community, the different officials. What I'm coming across is a backlog of cases, and it is challenging sometimes to get a representative, let's say from the police department or any other organization that's involved with domestic abuse, to come to our temple and to just have a brief meeting. The other thing is, that's one, and the other is something that I don't know that we have a lot of control over, but most of the individuals in our temple are probably aware of the fact that there is an intimate partner abuse representative, but there is a hesitancy and they're afraid to approach, because I've had people come to me and say, well, there's a scenario going on here, and this person really needs to speak with you. My position, of course, is that I cannot go directly to the person and say, well, I know this is going on, and you need to talk to me. How do you handle those situations where you know something is going on, and in some cases you actually see the end result of the abuse, but you have certain people or certain cultures that are afraid to actually report it? How does one handle that? And I mean, is there a way to handle it? Because you can't force a person to get help, but we are aware that domestic violence and abuse has increased considerably over the years, and especially within the last couple of years, because when COVID came through, it had a lot of us bunched up at home with each other. So you had all these personalities showing up that maybe you didn't see every day, but now you're there in the house with each other, you're seeing it. It's increased. What are some of the key techniques or things that you would suggest the intimate partner abuse person or non-violence representative at different temples to do to encourage one to come forward? This question is for both Krishnarupa or Syama Mohini. Any thoughts on that?
Krishnarupa will answer that.
Thank you. I think we can both put a lot in there, but I'll go first at your invitation. So yeah, definitely, Antaryami, during COVID, the statistics for domestic abuse increased exponentially. For that very reason, people were stuck in the same house together for, you know, weeks and weeks on at a time. And yes, it really was a huge increase, definitely. the second point I'd like to make is that it's also, it's not always a quick thing building relationships with management. It takes time and patience and, you know, maybe some gentle dialogue with the managers to say, oh, look, I'd like to meet with you. Can you give me 15 minutes of your time? And just say, you know, the kind of thing that you're trying to do, what your mandate is and how you'd, you know, you're there to serve and try and assist them in, you know, very difficult situations. Please make use of the knowledge that you have. Maybe suggest perhaps you could give a seminar to the devotees about domestic abuse, raising awareness. I deliberately call my seminar not domestic violence or domestic abuse. I call it harmony in the home. So it's much more of an approachable thing, but it is about domestic and family violence. So the third point I'd like to make, because your questions or your topics were very broad there, is that you're right, we can't tell someone what to do. We can't tell the person who's a victim of domestic violence, you should do this, you should do that. We can't do that because they're already being controlled. They're already in a very traumatized state. They've lost their sense of self-worth. They've lost their confidence. If you suspect someone is a victim of domestic abuse, but you don't know that person, as you said, you can't go to them and say, look, I think you need help. How can I help you? Because of the stigma involved, no matter whether it's, I think doesn't really matter whether it's an ethnic family or Caucasian family, there's still stigma there. And then what I would do is, if you have a real serious concern, I would find out who is a close friend of that person and go to that person and say, look, I have something that's strictly confidential to talk to you about. You must not repeat this to anybody else, but I have some concerns about your friend XYZ, that she may be a victim of domestic abuse. Are you close enough to her that you could gently introduce that subject to her? You know, does she need some help? We've got some experts here who can help you. That person, even if she is a victim, she might say, no, everything's fine. But at least she knows there's people there who care. And later on, she may have some courage and approach someone. But it's very important that it's kept very confidential, not a subject of temple gossip. Very, very important. And then the other final point I'd like to make is it's really good to have, you know, posters and brochures readily available for devotees. So, for example, in all of our temples in Australia, we have an A3 poster with this lovely logo image of a tree in the shape of a heart. And the title is Love Should Hurt. And there's a poster there, and it says, you know, it gives the GBC resolution. It talks about, you know, how it's never the fault of the victim. Please contact such and such a person if, you know, you feel you need some help. And then we have a A5 gatefold brochure that, you know, folds out. It's also entitled Love Shouldn't Hurt, and it gives more information. Once again, the resolution, GBC resolution, then it gives a short synopsis of the different kinds of abuse, the cycle of abuse, and then one section is all the different services that are available in Australia, and then, you know, the women's minister's name and contact details. So I think if we get those out, similar things out in our temples as well, that's a way for devotees. And very importantly, the poster should also be in the ladies' bathroom. Even in the man's bathroom, because there's not only women who are victims of domestic abuse, but definitely in the ladies' bathroom, Because if someone's a victim of domestic abuse, they're not going to be standing there in front of the temple notice board, you know, taking a picture of the poster so they can call later. If it's in the bathroom, then, you know, they have a chance to take down some details in a safe, private situation.
Yeah. Yes.
Over to you.
Shamohini,
Yes, we
I'm
have
sorry.
the same posters and all the IPAs. We have the poster in the bathrooms with our name and contact information. And sometimes many of us have found out that in different temples, you know, those posters disappear. So we go back and put them back. And at least in our temple, I think after the third or fourth time, I talked to the temple president and I said, like, come on, you know, either somebody needs it or somebody doesn't want to. For some reason, they feel uncomfortable with this poster being there. And so we ended up putting our Janmashtami souvenir, and we also put them in the hallway. So I said, well, we were trying to conceal it, but now you're pushing us to make it open for everyone. So because it's important, and it's not a taboo. It's for real. This domestic abuse is there. It's happening, and it's not okay. Because if we don't take care of these issues right now, how are we going to grow as a society? How are we going to be strong as a society? And what is the example that we're going to be giving, or that we are giving to our future leaders? They're not going to be caring. If we do not care right now, how are we going to expect them to care tomorrow for others?
Yes.
Everything is a cycle.
Yes, really, really good points. And if you don't, like I mentioned before, and the topic of our conversation here is, if we don't have safe families, we won't have a strong community, right? I mean, it's part of our philosophical makeup that the vulnerable is protected. Women are protected, children are protected. And if the men in our movement aren't doing that, then the movement's not going to be healthy. You know, and the children, as you know, that when children are exposed to this abuse, the effect on them is so deep, very negative. It can result in transgenerational abuse even. So when a child grows up in an abusive environment, they think, oh, that's how my father behaved like that to my mother, and my mother accepted it, and my mother, you know, just went on. So if I marry an abusive husband, well, I just have to suck it up. And the boys think, oh, well, that's how my father dealt with conflict in the marriage or issues. He just, you know, treated my mother like that, coercive control or, you know, physical abuse, whatever. It's going to be like a disease, and we need to really, you know, really focus on this. And I mean, there's so many things for us to focus on as a spiritual movement, but this is a critical point, because if we don't, it goes completely against everything that Prabhupada was teaching us. Protect the women, protect the children, protect the cows. And you don't do that, then the society will be rotten at the core. And that's not what Prabhupada wanted. You know, Prabhupada was very strong on that. You know, he said if the husband who beats the wife is a dog. Very, very strong on that.
Those are very, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. And just Syama Mohini Prabhu, you were mentioning about the posters being taken down. Well, of course, I first approached, you know, my TP and said, look, I want to put these posters up, just, you know, letting you know you're okay with that. Yes, of course, it's okay. And then I was away for a couple of weeks. And when I got back, the poster had been removed from the bathroom and the temple notice board. And I managed to do a bit of sleuth work and find out who had actually removed it. And I approached that person, and it was a lady, who was a woman, And I said, why did you remove those posters? You don't have authority to take those posters down. And she said, oh, but, you know, people come to our temple and they come for spiritual reasons. And then when they see a poster about domestic violence on there, they think we're all abusers. And I went, well, no, actually, they're inspired by it because they understand that we are not, you know, ostriches that stick our head in the sand, that we are thinking about the holistic health and well-being for our devotees and visitors, not, you know, not that we're just pretending everything's hunky-dory when, you know, anyone who knows anything knows that it's not. So those posters went back up, and I check every time I'm at the temple, I check and make sure they're there. And then I make sure that we've got a little perspex bracket right outside the temple room door that has the brochures, you know, the gatefold brochures as well. So yeah, it's an interesting phenomena, Syama Mohini, that they were being removed.
Yes, but so we have to keep trying, and again, the care and disposition, right? I'm glad you mentioned Srila Prabhupada, because while talking to you or some of your God brothers and God sisters about Prabhupada, there's one key word in all their descriptions about Srila Prabhupada, and that is caring. So if we are following Srila Prabhupada, shouldn't we following that caring disposition also? Shouldn't we caring for one another? And again, understanding that it's not my karma or her karma, that's why she should be mistreated like this. But rather, if we are Vaishnavas, calling ourselves Vaishnavas or aspiring Vaishnavas, then one of the things is that we don't want to see anybody suffering. We don't want to see anybody in pain. Therefore, we should do the best we can to alleviate the suffering of that person. Yes, we can chant Hare Krishna all day, but we can remove that person, or we can help and have to remove that for that abuse, whether it's physical or emotional, because like, if it is not physical, well, you will not see it, right? If it is physical abuse, everybody can see it. But if it is psychological abuse, it's just like the words can create, but can destroy, and sometimes it's even harder than to punch. So caring. What I Prabhupada is caring in cooperation. These two words are always there. So we should do it.
It's the very key. I mean, I was listening to a very early lecture of Prabhupada's recently, and it was 1967 or really, really early. And right in that lecture, Prabhupada's talking about that we are a family. ISKCON members are family members to each other, and then we must care for them. But we didn't hear that. All we were focused on was our own spiritual care. And it's only been in the last 10, 15 years that we've actually, you know, the pennies dropped, we've twigged and went, oh, hang on, Prabhupada was talking about this, caring for each other, way back in the early days, way back. And it is very important. And devotees who use that argument that, oh, well, it's obviously your karma, that you're being treated this way, you should just tolerate it and, you know, be patient. Well, if I find that a fatally flawed argument, because it's the karma of the whole world to suffer in the material world. So why bother giving them the holy name? It's their karma to suffer, right? So it's so flawed to say to a person, oh, well, it's your karma, you just have to suffer it. After all, there must have been those qualities in you that you were attracted to someone like that and wanted to marry them, you know, like very, very flawed understanding and flawed philosophy. So, okay, you could say that it's the karma of a victim to suffer in this way, but it's also their karma to get themselves out of it.
Yes.
You know, so why? It's so flawed. I have to smile when I think about it too. But it does actually go on where some devotees are preaching that, yes, you just tolerate the abuse. And I've even heard where a devotee was told, tolerate the abuse. When it gets very bad, just leave for a while and come back. So those of us who know about the cycle of domestic abuse, there is that explosive period. Then the victim threatens to leave or will leave or has left. And then the perpetrator of the violence is remorseful, not actually remorseful, but he wants that person back so that he can control them. She can control him, being fair to both genders. So then they'll do anything, you know, to entice the person to stay. The person goes back because they think, oh, you know, I love them once, they've promised they won't do it again. And then it's what is called that honeymoon period, as you know. And then slowly, slowly the tensions build and there's another big explosion. So to advise someone, just tolerate it. When it gets really bad, leave, go away for a while and then come back. It's just perpetrating that cycle of abuse, and it will never end. It will never end.
You have brought up a very good point. And Syama Mohini, if you have anything that you wanted to add to this, because it's going right into the next topic. So did you want to add something?
No, please go ahead.
Krishnarupa was saying?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. The next topic is how to deal with guests and seniors who may promote the unhealthy ideology. And the point that Krishnarupa brought up was that most people fall back on the scriptures and they interpret it in such a way that the victim feels like they've done something wrong, that they're supposed to, how do we say it, fall on the sword and accept and just go along with the program. But you find this is the thoughts behind most, well, let's say some of the temple leadership and some of the senior disciples, and of course even guests that figured, well, what domestic violence? This is your spouse, whatever takes place, you're in it for better or for worse. And the other point is people hide these posters. And I'm glad you brought that up too, because I've had the posters taken down. So I'm so glad you brought that point up. But the point is falling back on the scriptures and quoting the scriptures and referring to it as a way to accept violence and a domestic abuse and a reason to sweep it under the carpet. And that is very prevalent. I don't think it's just in one particular temple. I don't imagine there's a quick fix for it, but it begs a response and a solution to it happening so often. So any other points? Not that Krishnarupa didn't bring up some really good ones, but any other thoughts you have on that falling back on or quoting the scriptures in such a way that the victim feels that they've not been really victimized. They were supposed to accept whatever happened. Any other points?
Well,
You go ahead.
And in terms of guests, we, and I'm talking about now my yatra, right? We for example, if we know who the speaker is going to be, we had one situation. I'm not going to go into who that person was, but it was not very favorable for, or rather, was very favorable for women to, you have to accept whatever is going on because that's part of your dharma. And I was like, I haven't heard anything like that. So we opted to remove that person from our future guests. So we cannot have we need to have a cordial conversation with the person. Plus, we know our guests right? Every temple knows our guest. We know who is for and against, and we all know our own yatras. What is the need of our yatras? If we know that there are some issues, that there are some domestic abuse going on, we would not want to have a speaker that we know is not going to, it doesn't take domestic abuse seriously, because we don't want them to add more fire, more oil into the fire. We need someone who's going to come and say, hey, our talks, our actions have to match our words. And you can talk about tolerance. Well, see how tolerance was Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu the moment he knew that Lord Nityananda had been struck on the forehead, right?
Mm.
In both his Sudarshan chakras, so talk about tolerance. So we have to be very careful, and maybe then they will understand. You know, those guests will understand that there might be places where they are welcome. There are places that they will not be welcome, because unless and until each temple, each yatra stand up and say, no, this is not going to happen. But we can do it one temple, one yatra at a time. We cannot control 10,000 different places, but at least the message needs to be sent that we need to help we need to help everyone to come closer to Krishna, not to separate them. And the way we bring people closer to Krishna is by being respectful, by respecting each other, by acknowledging that, again, we are all working together, not against each other, by cooperation.
Yes.
Krishnarupa, you can elaborate more on this, because that's...
Yeah, please. Krishnarupa?
Thank you. No, it's really good points there, Syama Mohini, and it's sometimes it's difficult when a speaker comes out and you may not know exactly what their position is, and then you start getting complaints after they've been giving the home programs or classes or seminars, and you start getting a raft of complaints. I can't believe this person is saying this, and why is she saying this? If she continues to say this, then I'm going to stop any donations to the temple at all. Like, it can be very difficult. But once you've kind of realized, okay, well, this person is not increasing the harmony in the yatra, but causing disharmony, then the GBC has to be informed, and hopefully that person won't come out again and give public lectures. But sometimes you don't know what they're like, and especially it might be a sannyasi or something like that. Then if they're giving a class and you can see that it's really adverse to protection of women, perhaps in these cases, this type of case, domestic violence, and they're doing scripture bending. The scripture bending is something one has to be very aware of, and that's why it's included in that GBC resolution. Then, obviously you have to either ask some gentle questions at question time to give the a different viewpoint, and then later on, out of the class, then talk to your either talk to the guest speaker yourself, or have your temple president talk to them and say, look, we really don't accept this kind of these kind of statements in our yatra, and please don't make them again. But you can't just sit there and listen. I mean, you can't. You want to be careful you're not committing offences to the speaker, but during question time, you could say, well, you made this statement, but actually Prabhupada said this, or actually this is another way of looking at it. And then if it's a really serious thing, then speak to your temple president, say, look, this is really, I don't know if you heard the class today, it's really not on. This was said, that was said. Can you please, do something about it? And in seventh canto, in chapter 11, in verse 28, Prabhupada's, it's very clear that a woman does not need to serve a fallen husband. And I think it might be interesting if I read it out. Is that okay if I read it out?
Please do. Please do.
Yes. It's Bhagavatam 7th Canto, Chapter 11, verse 28 in the purport. And Prabhupada says, I quote, "Thus a chaste woman is advised not to agree to serve such a husband, that is, a fallen husband. It is not that a chaste woman should be like a slave, while her husband is Naradhama, the lowest of men. Although the duties of a woman are different from those of a man, a chaste woman is not meant to serve a fallen husband. If her husband is fallen, it is recommended that she give up his association. Giving up the association of her husband does not mean, however, that a woman should marry again and thus indulge in prostitution." That's a very heavy statement there, Prabhupada. If a chaste woman unfortunately marries a husband who is fallen, she should live separately from him. Now, my point of view is that a man who uses violence in the home, who perpetrates domestic abuse, he fits into that category of being a fallen husband. Although Prabhupada didn't specifically say a man who uses violence in the home, but someone who is violent in the home, whether it's physical or emotional or, and when we're talking about violence in the home, we're not talking about a one-off, lost my temper kind of a situation. This is a repetitive series of behaviors, right? It's not just like a one-off thing, because there's always going to be a conflict in the marriage. And, if it seems that that conflict is bordering on domestic abuse, then the person who's that victim, they can often nip it in the bud. They can often stop it right at the very beginning and say, if you do this again, I'm leaving you. The perpetrator will very rarely do it again because they're testing the water. How far can I go? This is a person who likes to have coercive control over another individual. So, often you can cut it right when it starts and very seriously. And if that doesn't work, then, you have to take other steps but to be aware of that domestic abuse. So anyway, that's how I would deal with those situations. It is difficult when you get speakers that may occasionally come and they bend the scriptures a bit, but we have to know the scriptures ourselves. We have to know what's with the Prabhupada. If we're, for example, in the seminar I have on harmony in the home, the first 10 slides is all scriptural, all different things that Prabhupada says in Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita about the position of women, how the role of the man is to protect the woman, what happens if it doesn't, they don't protect the woman. And then it brings up the whole discussion, well, what does protection mean? It doesn't mean control. It means, helping each other in their spiritual life, in each other's spiritual life, in a very cooperative and loving way. Prabhupada describes a husband as the most intimate friend of the wife. So how can that intimate friend then beat you or gaslight you or, be violent in any of those ways?
Yes, very good point. You opened up, both you and Syama Mohini opened up a question that we probably touched on, but what I'm coming across in most situations in the temple where there's domestic violence is that usually the perpetrator is a very big financial contributor to the temple, one. And secondly, the other thing that sometimes keeps the abused individual from reporting or coming forward or even seeking help is the fact that they are financially dependent on the abuser. Now, I'm certain there's nothing that we can directly do in a situation like that, but how would you handle that? Because finances play a very big role in domestic abuse cases where you'll find abused victims of many backgrounds that will not come forward simply because they are tied financially and they will continue to take the abuse, or in the situation where the abuse is taking place in the temple and the abuser is a contributor, a very big contributor to the temple. How would you, Krishnarupa and Syama Mohini, how would you handle a scenario like that? Or is that something that we could indirectly handle or address?
You can go, Syama.
Syama Mohini?
It is a tough one when for the management, because if it is a tough contribution, but over here is a matter of how much is the life's worth. So and that would be from my perspective, how much is somebody's life's worth? Is it worth, whatever amount we are getting, and this person's life is being, destroyed? So at the end, everything is temporary, nothing is permanent, right? Everything is temporary. So do we invest in that is permanent, on something that is just temporary? Do we want to set the right example? Do we want to give the right example to our future generation, that we are here and we are bound by character, not by money?
Yeah.
So what is our dharma? We have to see what our dharma is, and our dharma is to protect. Well, the dharma of a husband, of a leader, is to protect, right? Why? And there are so many examples that we have in Shastra. Why Bhishma fell? Why Dronacharya fell? Because they failed to protect Draupadi.
Yes.
And Dronacharya took one. Well, he was having his very good position, right? And because of having that position, because he was getting all that help and the monetary contribution from Duryodhana, he could not protect Draupadi. And what happened? He fell.
Yes.
So we have examples.
Yes.
It's a test of our true moral compass, isn't it?
Yeah.
If a manager knows, for sure, not just a suspicion, but he's pretty confident that this person is perpetrating violence in the home, and he doesn't try and help, then, because as Antaryami pointed out, there might be a big financial contributor to the temple, then it's showing that there's a lack of morality there, and a lack of true morality, not just superficial morality, but deep spiritual morality, that that they might treat that as an oversight just because of the financial situation. And it kind of leads me back to that point where we try and encourage victims to go to the police. So when it becomes a police case, no one can cover it over. No one can cover it over. But you also have to, you can't push someone to do something.
True. That is
a really good idea if you do this, and we'll help you. Then it goes back to that original point, that one of the reasons why so many victims stay in an abusive relationship is because of that financial problem. If they leave, how do they support their kids? I mean, okay, long term, that would be solved. If there was a divorce, then you go to the court and you have that just, a settlement of your assets. That's there. But the immediate thing is, okay, where do I go? I've got no money.
Yes.
And that's a big, I know of cases like that. So yes, I'm being abused, but where do I go? How do I get out of this? And until it gets so bad, then the victim will go anywhere, go into a refuge and live with other women who are victims of domestic abuse until they can get resettled. And that's not a very pleasant environment either. But yeah, the financial thing, of course, you know, each government has lots of services, but they're not always like immediate, you know, unless you have to be taken to a shelter and police are called. But yeah, we somehow or other have to figure out ways where we make it okay for victims of domestic abuse to come forward and ask for help. We make it okay that it's not your fault. You didn't do anything. You know, there's never any excuse for abuse. Often the perpetrator will say, oh, look what you made me do. You know, and the victim is like, oh, if only I hadn't said this, or if only I hadn't done that, then I made my husband behave in this way.
Yeah.
You know, those are all very typical reactions of an abused person. They see themselves at fault, you know, which is very sad.
Yes.
But it's such a huge problem. And there's so many different aspects to it that we shouldn't be disheartened because it's so huge. We just have to chip away bit at bit, do what we can do, give seminars, encourage people to listen to the talks, develop relationships with the temple management, encourage the devotees gently and gradually to, you know, make a report, help them to go to the police. You can't make the report for them, but you can give a lot of moral support.
Exactly.
That is very key. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I said you could encourage the management, you know, to create, apart from the awareness programs, have policies, have zero tolerance policies, so that at least they know that we have this policy, and then the management will have to say, well, you know, I'm so sorry, I'm bound by this policy to act in this way. So the management will be kind of protected too, you know, it's not me, but this was an agreement from the congregation and the management that we will agree to have this policy, to set these policies, because we go and abide by ISKCON policies, but as a temple, we can have our own policies. We can have our own guidelines also. It could be a little bit more strict, you know, and that will protect us also and help us. And again, if we can strike a relationship with our local authorities, that's even better, because that is a deterrent. It works as a deterrent to either domestic abuse or child abuse, because they know that, okay, we have the police department is coming and is attending our Janmashtami programs or Govardhan Puja or things like that. So they see the local authorities' presence, so they understand, and everybody understands that no managerial or ecclesiastical authority is above the law. And it's important that everybody understand that, whether it's for domestic abuse, child abuse, or anything. Nobody is above the law. And again, we have to be caring. We have to just approach, and it's not easy. And like Krishnarupa Prabhu said before, we need a lot of patience and tolerance. But one day or another pays off. It will pay off because you are sincerely trying to do the right thing to help somebody else. And the more we give, the more we put, the more we're going to receive at the end. Krishna will help us in our endeavor. But having that communication, that relationship with outside agencies, with the local police department, comes very handy. Because then if you don't know how to act, you can always go to them and ask questions. They will not come and investigate, oh, why did you ask this question or everything? No, they will clear your doubts on what is your local policy, the local laws, what can you do, what you should not do, what will bring your temple, you know, problems. But, you know, they will guide you. They're not there to just be scared of. They will guide you. So they will become a partners, you know.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And in most, well, I can only speak for Australia, but in most largish police stations, I don't know about little rural ones, but they have a specialist police officer who deals with domestic abuse situations. Because in Australia, I think it's something like every 6 minutes, a policeman is called out to a domestic violence, a domestic violence situation. That's a lot. So, they have those dedicated police officers who are familiar with all of the, the nuances and the laws and everything like that. And I really like the good point you touched on there too, Syama Mohini, amongst the many other good points you mentioned, was about that, like having our volunteer agreements or our employment agreements. So within there's policy that each volunteer, each employee has to read and sign that they have read it. And in there can be, we have zero tolerance to any domestic violence, or domestic abuse, domestic and family abuse, and of course, child abuse or anything like that. But if it's there in a document, then they have to read it and they sign it, then, as you said, that kind of protects the management as well. Well, we've got this advice, you have a court order against you, you've read this document, you've signed it, and, we have to suspend you.
Yeah, I mean, there are, there's a say, right? But there is a will, there's a way. If we really want to tackle this issue, there are many ways that we can do it. But we have to start, having the rule boiling and sincerely, just try to make a change and do more training, temple training on Vaishnava etiquette and how to, and then Vaishnava etiquette also that begins at home, with each other, having more of those trainings, workshops, and we're both, we'll understand, the relationship, what kind of relationship they're supposed to be having, what healthy relationship is, what respect is, because when respect is not there, nothing can grow. I always say that respect is like a little seed. When respect is there, then you can love, you can be tolerant. But how can you love someone you don't respect? How can you be tolerant with someone you don't respect? And instead of just work out, chant more. How can I go to chant when I'm in so much pain? I'm really crying out to Krishna. But am I crying out to Krishna because I really want to connect to Krishna, or I'm crying because of the pain that my body is having, that my mind is having? So we have to be very careful. And there's one thing that, since this is building a circle of safety, we are in a well positioned in Australia, US, Europe, but there will be some places that unfortunately, even the police department or local authorities will do absolutely nothing to help the ladies. There are no shelters, not even religious ones. They can go and they will not have any kind of, monetary help, right? What to do? Many of them have even taken their lives because there's no help, and there's always like that. So what to do?
Yes.
So to those ladies, and probably if they're happy to watch this program, well, there's a solution for you too. And I would like just to say that you are like Krishnarupa Prabhu mentioned very rightly. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. And you have to be probably going into the survival gear, right? The survival mode. And learn to get to what are the tools that you can work yourself while you are able to get out of that situation. Don't despair. Try to contact anybody who you trust. And again, Krishnarupa Prabhu was very clear on that and so certain about that. Trust is a key. And we have to make sure that if somebody confides in us, we are to keep quiet, to help them, and not to just talk. That's prajalpa. We really have to care.
It's not just prajalpa either, Syama Mohini. It's very dangerous. It's
Dangerous,
very dangerous for the victim.
Yes, it is. And so like and I'm saying this because I had a talk with someone who was in that position. And I've been thinking, ways like how to help someone like that, in those kind of scenarios. And the only thing I can say is just don't give up, but to understand that this is not your fault, and you're really being a victim, but that you are not alone. And one day, this is not forever. This is just a temporary. It's going to be there. You're going to be seeing the light one day or another, and you yourself will, hear from here. Don't listen. Hear from here, and just take it out from here. Listen to the good things. But it's just like, for example, right now we are having a conversation, and we are listening to each other, and probably there is noise, going on outside, right? We are hearing that, but we are paying attention here. So similarly, when somebody's abusing you, just hear, focus on Krishna, focus on something, listen to that, make good use of your of the right vision, and this is your right vision. Don't let the wrong things get into your ear. Hopefully that will help you develop strength within to tolerate the situation should you be in an area where help is really not available. Krishnarupa, could you please add something on this?
Yes, it's very heartbreaking to think of the fact that, yes, there are some women or many women in certain countries that don't have all the resources that are available to others, may not get the police assistance that they should be getting, may not be the government resources available. And it's, I can't imagine how awful that must be for women who are abused and in a situation like that. So yes, try and take heart if you're, in that kind of a situation yourself. Go to your local temple, try and search out if there's a women's minister in your local temple there, or someone who's, an advocate for the women, and try and develop, meet them, talk to them, see what they can do to help you. If there isn't, try and contact the International Vaishnavi Ministry. They may be able to give you some help or some advice or direct you to someone in your temples. But I pray to Krishna that, you will be able to get some help, because it's a terrible situation to be in. And once again, reiterating, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault.
Those are such key points, Krishnarupa and Syama Mohini. You brought out a lot of good topics. What's really one of the key things, though, is actually making a police report, because I don't think most people do it. They're a little hesitant on it. And the other portion, I think, Syama Mohini, you may have said that. And yes, we're running. We've just got a few more minutes, but you mentioned in most cases, some women will not report simply because they may have to go to the shelter, and the shelter is not devotee friendly. The surroundings, what they will be a part of, they would rather stay in the situations. But bottom line, creating an environment where the victim feels comfortable in approaching the representative in the temple or senior female in the temple, and they feel comfortable enough in reporting it. And it's not something that happens overnight. this is a foundation that has to be built gradually but consistently. And you've given me a lot of pointers too, because as an IPA representative in our temple, sometimes I want things to happen so quickly, but this is too important to rush it. So I am so very much dedicated to taking the necessary time and the necessary steps to establish the foundation, a relationship with temple management, which is what we must do, and continue to come together, to share, to be available, put those postings up. And I don't know that we have much time, but do we quickly have a moment to at least share with those that are listening what situations, what type of situations require reporting and monitoring? Do we have enough time to quickly tap into that for a moment? We've got just a couple of minutes.
Maybe Krishnarupa Prabhu, would you like to do that?
Krishnarupa?
Well, in most countries, or at least in Australia, let me speak for Australia because I know that is the fact. If there's children involved, and you're pretty certain that there's a domestic abuse situation happening, then there's mandatory reporting to the Child Services Department. So in Australia, it's Child Services. I don't know what it's called in other parts of the world, but that can be anonymous. You can say, look, I've got, I'm very confident that there is a domestically violent situation happening in this family. There are children in that family, and I'm very concerned about their well-being. So then, they'll have to get some details, and then they'll go and visit that home. They'll look into it. In terms of if you know that there's a domestically abusive situation, you can, and you hear it, it's next door neighbor or whatever, then you can call the police and report and say, look, I think there's a domestic happening in the next door, and a neighbor's house or something like that. Could you send someone out to investigate it? But it's in terms of us interfering or becoming involved when we just suspect, we haven't seen or heard, but we suspect, that active bystander situation has to be treated very, very delicately. Very delicately. You can't just barge up to someone and say, I'm really worried about you. Yes. Are you with domestic abuse? The person probably will say no because of embarrassment, so you have to have relationships with the devotees. And as I said earlier in our talk, that if you don't know that person, but you know someone who's close to that person, you could delicately and in confidence say to them, I am a bit worried about your friend. Is there any way that you could just, because I know you're close with her, could you find out if she's okay, if she's safe? I mean, after all, we can't knock on doors, barge in, break down doors and whisk people away. We can't do that. And often when that happens, the wife will turn on you as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not, we can't be self-appointed vigilantes. We have to use our intelligence and take advantage of training. And for IPAs, and you've done training as well, but in Australia, I always attend, or have attended a lot of workshops. I go quite frequently, and I make friends or contacts with people in those workshops. So then I can, call the lecturer or something and say, oh, what do you think about this? Or do you know anyone who could help this particular person? And, women who work or people who work in that arena, they're very dedicated and they're very concerned and caring people. So they really want to help others or help people who are suffering. So I've never received any knockbacks to say, oh no, sorry, I can't help you. they always go, oh no, this would be, why don't you suggest this? Or yes, I'll try and find someone who's a lawyer in that particular suburb who might be able to help. You know, they do really care. So like Syama Mohini was saying, that you develop the relationships with external authorities like the police or like the, you know, the different government services that are available.
Thank you so much. Syama Mohini, did you want to add anything before we end it?
Nothing. I think I can copy every word that Krishnarupa Prabhu said and apply it to North America. Yes, this is exactly the same. Mandatory reporting is only when children are involved, and rest applies the same.
With great respect for both you, Krishnarupa Devi Dasi and Syama Mohini Devi Dasi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your contribution. And it is our goal to create a safe circle, to have safe family environments, so that ultimately the entire world can be at peace. That is a very lofty goal, but I think nothing is impossible with the Lord. So thank you so much for being here. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Haribol.
Krishna.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to listen to you, Syama Mohini, to listen to you, Antaryami, and there's so much that can be done, and we just have to take one step at a time. And
Thank
pray
you
to
so
Sri
much.
Prabhupada, because he wants us to care and love each other. Jai.
Yeah.
Glory to Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Thank you
Hare
so much.
Krishna.
Very honored to and humble to be in the same panel with you, Krishnarupa Prabhu, Antaryami Prabhu. It's been an honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Krishna. Yes,
Haribol.
Prabhupada.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.